Hi, Thomas.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm fine. So great you're here, Thomas, joining us in this UMICHile conversations that I call them, to reconnect with all of you, or as many of you possible.
Such a nice thing to do.
Thank you, Thomas. We were recalling when was the last time we saw each other. Actually, maybe 3 years ago,
Yeah,
maybe four. Yeah,
in Santiago.
in
That was
Santiago.
fortuitous. I was going there on my way down to your hometown, I think Concepcion,
Mhm.
to do a little presentation. And I thought you were working in Argentina or something like that. And you,
Ah, I was still in Argentina then.
but
Okay.
then, but no, but then you said something had been cancelled, so we were able to meet for lunch the next day, which is
Uh-huh.
amazing.
Great. Yeah, and how was that experience in Concepcion?
It was. I wish I had stayed a little bit longer. Actually, it was. I just went down to the hotel, and then we did a little. I did a little presentation to music string teachers
Mm.
on Vamouche, and so it was a bit quick. It was a bit sort of businessy, I suppose. And then I
Mhm.
just disappeared again the next day. Went back up to Santiago for a few days, and then back. I was going to. It was part of a trip to Peru, where I was doing a little bit of work in Peru as well, in
Uh-huh.
Lima with a friend. So it was actually through one of your friends' contacts, Armando,
Armando, yeah.
in Chile, and he because I was going to Lima anyway, so I said, "Oh, can I come down and do a presentation to your foundation that was working down in Concepcion, so in Valdivia, I think it was even further
Mhm.
away."
Yeah,
So
Concepcion and Valdivia. Yeah.
yeah,
Valdivia is a very nice town next to the river, no?
I didn't get to go there, unfortunately. That was where it was supposed to be, but we ended up in Concepcion, which was also a very nice town, I thought.
Uh-huh.
Very pretty. Yeah.
It's amazing that you were in my hometown.
I know. I never imagined it would ever happen, but yeah, it's always felt so. I mean, it is from London. It's probably furthest away you can get. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
never thought I'd be passing. I said, "Oh, Alejandra, I'm just passing." But it's nice actually.
And Thomas, where are you originally from?
So my mother's Danish, so my parents were living in Africa um, when my brother and sister were born in Kenya, and then my dad was between contracts as a vet, so we traveled back to Denmark where I was born, and then shortly after that we moved to Ivory Coast for 2 years in East Africa, and then just for 2 years, and then I moved to London. So I think of myself as a Londoner. So I
Mhm.
lived in London most of my life, and that's where I'm now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And 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 when did you start playing cello, or when did you start with music? Is anyone in your family a musician, or?
Uh, my mum played the piano. Played the piano. She stopped when we started playing. I don't know if that's a regular thing, but she used to play the piano, and the piano was right in the middle of the house. So I would hear her playing the piano when I was younger. She played, in particular, I remember the slow movement of the Appassionata. No, do I mean that? A flat major. Not the Appassionata, the other one, the other really famous one. Dum da dum da dum dum. Christ, this is embarrassing. It's got the famous name. Everyone knows C minor. Everyone knows it. Anyway, she used to play that one a lot. Um, and then there was a Danish piano teacher at my primary school, Hannah Pamsen, who was absolutely golden, just wonderful woman. And I think my mum wanted to connect with her because they were both Danish. So she said, "Oh, would you teach my son the piano?" So I started piano lessons. I think I was 6,
Mhm.
and she was lovely. She got me to improvise and compose and things like that. And then they offered cello lessons at the school when I was 7, and I went for that. And I was
Mhm.
not a very good student. I didn't practice at all. But it was definitely something I kind of felt that I wanted to be doing. even if I wasn't doing it very earnestly or working very hard, but I wanted to do it anyway. And then it wasn't a huge success, the cello, actually. I didn't practice much. I didn't particularly enjoy it after the first couple of lessons. Well, mixed reasons, and possibly one reason why I quite enjoy teaching, because I sort of feel like I want to do it the way that I wasn't taught myself. So I dropped the cello early on at secondary school. So when I was 12, I was allowed to stop it, so I stopped it instantly. And then I came back to it. When you start growing up, you sort of get to an age where you start realizing you've got to make some serious choices in life. You know, are you going to do this or are you going to do that? And because I didn't have much skill as a musician, it never even occurred to me that I could pursue music. And also I felt that I needed to do more important subjects like science or academics, stuff like that, which was absolutely not me. I'm not an academic in that way, and so, but I thought that I should be. So I made some terrible choices for my A levels, like the senior exams. I chose music, physics, and maths, and music was just for fun. And I felt that I had piano skills, but they were rather poor, and I had very bad reading skills, or none really. And then I thought, well, I'll take up an orchestral instrument. So I thought about a few, and then I thought, well, I have some cello background, so I'll do the cello. But then that's when it all changed, though, because I absolutely loved it. And when you're 16 and you decide you really want to do something, you can put massive amount of energy into it and make dramatic progress very quickly if you're determined, which I was. So from a teacher's point of view, it's a good lesson, because you should never write anyone off if they're still teenagers, because they can change like instantly, and that's what happened to me. And so once I felt that this could be something I could do against all the odds, nothing was stopping me. I went for it completely.
I remember when I was teaching. I used to teach in a youth orchestra program in the south of my hometown, actually. And I had a very, very talented violin student. And maybe 2 or 3 times he came with his parents to tell me, I don't think I want to continue playing the violin, And I will always tell I would tell the parents, he's too young to make a decision. Just force him a little bit for a while. And then when he's, maybe when he's 18 or 16, he can decide if he really wants this or not, no? But I will always make sure that the parents realize that an 8 years old doesn't really need to make a decision like this. and now he's a violinist, like he's finishing his studies, and so it was a good choice, a good decision, no?
Absolutely. I mean, they don't. There doesn't always have to be massive progress happening. I mean, the most important thing is that they just keep going. And I think for what I've observed, the one thing that I really stickler for is that kids do ensemble playing as soon as possible, like right from the beginning. They play with other people, and then it becomes far less stressful almost. It's just something that you do with other people, and it really dissolves the tension and the stress, and it just makes it communal and fun. And if you I've known children who've never practiced ever individually, but they just keep coming to these ensembles and they keep having their sort of lessons. And they actually can make some seriously good progress up to a point, obviously, and up to a point. Then and then you would hope at a certain point that they realize that this is something that they're addicted to and they can't stop it. And then, I mean, it's not ideal, but it is possible to go really far without very much individual practice if you're doing ensembles and stuff like that, because it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours of playing in a week, and most kids on their own don't practice that much unless they've got parents breathing down their necks. in which case that's a big advantage there, but a lot of children don't have that necessarily.
It's interesting what you say because, well, in the programs, the youth orchestra programs in South America, that we, in a way, we follow the Venezuela program, no? The Sistema.
Yeah.
Most of the students now, the music students now, have gone through that program. So, like you said, most of the kids that start playing instruments now, they play in ensembles from the beginning,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
Like even like when they're just starting, they could have groups of, well, a little bit like Suzuki, no, like groups of, so you can play scales and arpeggios, but always together, no?
Yeah.
And I think in a way, of course, you get inspired by it because you are with others, and but also it's amazing how the students and I would say all of us learn from each other, no? That just I had to tell you this one story, that I used to be a part of this youth orchestra program, and I had little kids of between 6 and 8 years old learning violin, and I would have these group sessions for all of them, and I remember this one specific group session that we were doing something specifically, and this girl, maybe she was 7 years old or 8, she was playing and then started vibrating, no? And I realized that all of the other kids were watching her, and I saying, what is she doing, no? So I observed this, and I asked her, um, I said, oh, tell me what you're doing. And no, I said, how did you learn to do this? And she said, well, I saw you the other day doing that, and I decided to do it, you know, just like that.
Yeah.
And it was so cute because, but what it was more inspiring for me was to watch all the other kids watching her. It's like, she's doing something that I probably would love to do.
That's what you have to. You have to sort of harness in a group thing, because it can go two ways. It can either move in a negative way or a positive way, and it's up to the sort of teacher to make sure it steers in a positive way. Because once that catches on and the positive energy takes hold, then it just spreads, and you get kids that not only do they start copying them, but they start looking for things as well to copy, and they start observing so much more, and there's an element of competition in there, but it's not scary competition. It's motivational, you know. And so if you can harness that positive energy in a group, then there's nothing beats it. I mean, for motivating and getting kids working fast. I mean, I'm always partly because it takes a bit of the strain off you as a teacher, but to get kids to teach each other, I mean, that's something that a lot of teachers do, but it's so fun to watch, you know, because kids, they can reduce an explanation from, you know, we would articulate using fancy words and stuff which they may or may not understand, but if you ask a kid to explain something to the other kid, they'll just say, no, just do this, or whatever. They'll do something really crude, and I look at it and think, oh, they never go, and then suddenly I know, oh, okay, they got the message, they understood exactly what the person was saying. And teaching is not just good for the kids who are learning from the other kids, it's the kids who are teaching actually learn a lot while they're teaching as well. So it's a really useful little technique. But you can only do that in groups. You can't do that individually. I mean, I'm not saying individual lessons aren't a good idea, obviously they are, but for that positive energy, that enthusiasm, because I think when we teach, we're not just showing them how to play the violin, also we're teaching them how to have fun making music, essentially, and that's something that's much easier to harness in a group or an orchestra environment. Yeah,
absolutely. So Thomas, tell me about what happened after, you know, you were 16, 18, and eventually how did you get to University of Michigan?
Well, I was lucky. At 16, when I was really asking all these questions, about what I wanted to do, I was lucky enough to meet a teacher who was at my school, teaching cello at my school, who was brilliant. He noticed, he could see something was interesting about this chap, and he started to feed my curiosity, and started giving me a lot of attention in lessons, and I was playing in groups every night of the week. So I wasn't very good, but I was playing in an cello ensemble and an amateur orchestra, and then an after-school music group, and then a Friday night music group, because I just threw myself at everything. And this is while I was doing my A-levels, so I also had time to practice a lot as well. And then he just said, why don't you go to the Guildhall Open Day, which is, Guildhall is one of the three big music colleges in London. And I thought he was sort of joking because I was nowhere near. But he just sowed that seed. He sort of, go and have a look, And then, of course, I went and had a look, and I just thought, maybe I can do this. And as I said, at that age, if you decide you want to do something, you can achieve a lot in quite a quick amount of time. And then I started taking lessons at Guildhall with my prospective teacher, who was this guy's teacher as well. So it was a sort of bit of a family thing. And he was very good. So I went to Guildhall and I did 4 years there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great time. But at the end of it, there were two things that I felt. One is I had to carry on studying for a bit longer. And the other one was that I wanted to go away. I wanted to go abroad. I wanted to get out of England just for a bit. That was a very strong feeling. Mm-hmm. And so it was either Europe or America. And I always had a very strong fondness for America. It's funny because when you grow up watching a diet of American TV shows and films and everything like that, you feel like it's not that foreign. It's something that you could very easily acclimatize to or acclimate. So I started sending out a few letters. I did a bit of research, and I wrote to a chap in San Francisco State University. I didn't know anything about any of the institutions in America. And he wrote back saying, oh, he'll be in London, can we meet up? So I met up with him, and he said, apart from, he was encouraging me to go to that university, and I like the idea of San Francisco. It's a lovely town. But he said I should also look into Michigan, because that was where his teacher went. Mm-hmm. So I looked into it, and I looked up Erling Blundell Bengtsson, and I was quite struck by what a wonderful cellist he was. So I applied there, and applied to the Manhattan School as well, I think. And that's how it happened. Mm-hmm. And I think it was retrospectively a very good fit for me at the time. It was a wonderful school with amazing violinists and pianists in particular, which meant great chamber music. But it didn't have the intensity of a big city conservatoire, which is what I'd already been at. So it was absolutely perfect fit, I think, at the time, and it was an incredible time. I absolutely loved every minute of it.
Yeah. If you can remind me, you did your master's, right, at Michigan?
I did a two-year master's, yeah. And then 1 year I was looking into doing a doctorate as well, and then Bengtsson suggested, and I have a feeling, rather cynically, it was because he wanted to take a sabbatical. So he was like, oh, why don't you just do 1 year? And, but I think that was the right thing. I think 3 years would have been a bit, I know you did the full lot, didn't you? Mm-hmm. But after 1 year, I did that, and then I lived in 1 year in New York, and then I went back to London. And when I went back to London, I definitely felt that was what I wanted to do. That was another strangely powerful instinct, was that I wanted to go back to London. and I haven't felt the desire to move or live anywhere else since, luckily. So that's 20 years
now. No, but that's great. And I was thinking about our times at Michigan. We actually lived together.
Yeah, great. My favorite flatmate ever.
Yeah, great times at Michigan. Could you tell me what made it special about Benson, Ellington Benson, about your teacher at Michigan?
Well, I think it's because it was sort of a huge contrast to my previous teacher, because my first teacher was American. The Guildhall, Leonard Steen, who was from Portland, and he moved to London obviously, a long time ago. And he was very Leonard Rose kind of Galamian, very almost a kind of holistic scientific approach. So he would answer any detailed question about technique, in particular the bow arm, and he has an absolutely wonderful approach, a really good grounding into the basic mechanics of moving around the cello, which is fraught with problems almost more so than the violin, I think, because of the nature of the instrument being grounded, being on the ground, as opposed to the violin where both your arms are lifting. There's built into the violin a kind of a natural mechanism. I know it doesn't feel like it because it's a bit crooked, but the way the arms both lift, the balance in the body is you develop it in a much more natural way. The cello, because the cello is earthbound, the weight of the instrument is going down already. So we sort of have to lift our arms and then lower them again. It can create lots of confusion in the way you develop your technique, which is why cellists have such dramatically different ways of playing, I think, perhaps more so than the violin, although that's obviously arguable. But he had this approach which was all about lifting and suspension, and in order to allow natural weight your mind to connect with the body, connect with the bow arm. So when I got to Michigan, I had a cellist, Benson is just a phenomenally natural skill, talent. I mean, an incredible artist, musician. And Len in London wasn't particularly like that. You could argue the opposite almost with him. It was all a bit too mechanical. Whereas Benson was, if you come with him with a technical problem, like you say, how do I find this note out of the blue? Remember I played a contemporary piece by Oliver Nusson, and Benson's done loads, obviously, of contemporary music. And I went in and I said, so how do I find this top G? I had to play a sort of double stop at the bottom, and then I had to find this top G out of nowhere. And I would have expected him to say something like my old teacher was like, oh, well, you put your thumb on the A, and then you the fourth, and then you do a little thing, which would have taken a couple of steps, And I thought he would explain something like that. And he said, no, just play it. I said, what do you mean? So just do it. And then do it once, it'll be wrong. Then do it the second time, it'll be right. And I thought, okay, it's a bit like, I often say with kids now, it's a bit like using the Force, from Star Wars, that analogy. Use the Force, take away your goggles, Luke, and use the Force. And I like that analogy because, so I did it and I tried it and it worked. And it actually worked in the concert as well, because you so have to just trust your instincts on these things when you allow yourself to do that. And I think, and he was such an amazing example. I mean, I still don't think I've ever been so immersed in an unaccompanied cello or even violin in the same way that I have with Benson when he would play on his own. There was just unbelievable connection. You really felt like you were just seeing the soul, his soul exposed. And it was so incredibly tasteful. Everything, all his choices about his tempi and and his phrasing was always expressive, highly expressive, but it was also incredibly tasteful, which is not that common actually. So there was an honesty, not showy at all, just really clean and just it was so inspiring. And at the same time, it was depressing because every lesson you'd come out thinking.
Thomas, Thomas, I'm curious because he was old, right, when he was at Michigan.
I think when he was my teacher, he was 75 or something. Yeah, he wasn't young.
Did you ever ask him like how many hours he practiced, like during those times, or?
Well, I think he was. I think he definitely played every day, and he would certainly have. He used to, at least. You remember he was saying he would play a Bach suite every day as his sort of warm up, or he would play all the Piatti Caprices all the way through. He just had those things. I mean, he had an enormous repertoire in his memory anyway at any time. And in some classes, he would say, "Well, we've got a bit of time. What would you like? What would you like me to play?" And we could say Kodály Sonata. We could say Bach Suite. We could say whatever, and he'd just be able to do it. So I think he was. What I like a lot about him is he was a very music or led player. If you know what I mean. I think there are some. Like Heifetz, for example, would practice scales for 80% of the time, apparently. Whereas Bengtsson, he didn't, as far as I could tell, maybe someone could correct me, but he didn't really do scales much. He wasn't that sort of player. He just played music, and I think he got everything through playing music, and I don't think he ever played the cello without that being his motive, his focus. You know, beautiful clarity, phrasing, expression.
It's interesting. Sorry to cut you. It's interesting for me to hear this, Thomas, because Paul Cantor was very similar. No, now I don't know if it is because of the level that the student might have or not, but he will if he felt I had like a weakness that I had to work on, this weakness which will show in the repertoire. So we will practice in the repertoire. Yes. And he will give me or he will create some exercises for me to work on, but it was, he will never separate technique from music, and I just love that. No, because it is like that. It's like if it is like if you say, okay, this is my life at home, this is my life with the instrument, it doesn't work that way. No, so I totally, it makes sense to me about Bengtsson, but I'm sure he probably did technique and scales when he was young. I'm sure. No,
it's impossible to believe that he avoided it forever. But I mean, he was already professional when he was 20. You know, he was touring around playing concertos when he was 20. So he would have found his way really early on. I think, you know, I still feel like I'm still finding my way. I still feels like that now. I'm still, you know, he's still improving, still discovering things all the time. Whereas I think, and I'm sure he would have done, it's just he was already so far advanced at a very young age that he would have decided probably quite a long time ago what the approach that works for him. But I mean, you know, he seemed like such a complete package at a young age that I don't know. I'm sure he would have done his scales. I'm sure he would have done some scales at some point, as we all do occasionally. Just with scales, I think it's a bit of a controversial subject because I don't want to, because some people really, you know, it's a really important thing for them. But when you're teaching kids scales now, which is always torture. I mean, I find I've tried, I accompany and all the rest of it. But for kids, it's just remembering which finger do you use, when do you cross across the string, you know, what note are you playing? And if it's a difficult key, it's really difficult. But at the end of it, you start thinking, well, they're not even going to use that fingering if they ever see this in a piece of music, they're going to have to change that finger completely. I mean, so really the best way to teach scales is to just mix up your finger patterns the whole time anyway. And then I'm thinking, well, why don't you just play a piece with lots of scales and arpeggios? I mean, a Bach suite, I mean, you don't get more scales and arpeggios, and you've got several keys to choose from. I think in that sense, I would rather, at a certain point, I'd rather they just learn this Bach suite. I mean, it's a lot, it teaches them not just considerable awkward, difficult technique, but also they've got phrasing, music to consider, they've got balancing, they've got extremely complicated bowing technique and all the rest of it. I think I'm yet to be totally persuaded that hours of scale practice versus an hour of playing some Bach is one is, I don't know, maybe we'll start a little chat after this about what people think about that. But
no, it's true. For me, at least, when I used to teach, for me, the most important thing was to give the students some just the possibility of the students to concentrate, no, and to focus, and I don't know if you agree with me, but this is, I think, is the like the important issue here, no, like to develop a strong mind, if I could call it a way, so you can concentrate and then be conscious when you practice, no, and you can do that with a scale, you can do that with an interval, or I mean, we can all decide what is better for the student, but for me, eventually, I think it has to do with how you realize and how you get to know the mind of the student, and then how you manage so you can work on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating, I have to say. No?
It is pure psychology. I mean, when you're teaching, certainly with individuals, you do feel sometimes like a psychologist trying to work out the best strategy or approach for that person at that time. It's why it's so fascinating. That's why it's so endlessly. It's never boring anyway.
Yeah.
And if you've got a child, I mean, if you're really, the best teachers will never be put off by a sort of frustrating student. I know it's easier said than done, but ideally you'd always try to get the best out of everyone, and that's the goal. The goal is that they're not going to be the next Heifetz. The goal is that they somehow will discover something, like you're saying. They will be somehow stimulated and motivated to learn something.
Absolutely. Thomas, there are some people watching us here. Armando says, Thomas, with a big heart.
And coming back to London again.
Come back to London, Armando.
Yeah.
While I was listening to you, one of the first things that you shared this morning was about that you started playing the piano as a child, and you were also inspired to compose. Yeah. It's interesting to me because you are the third person in these conversations that said this. The other one was Derek Vermel and Adam Glazer.
Yeah.
No, they will practice piano and they will start like composing little melodies, and it like opened my mind because it's interesting. I mean, it didn't happen to me, but they said it was so natural, no, just like a little kid draws something or paints something. It's like they do that with music, and for me it was so inspiring, no. And so my question now goes to what you're doing now with Vamos, no, because that has a lot to do also with that you compose and create new pieces for the young kids. Could you share that with all of us?
Yeah, well, it did. I mean, I think apart from the fact you're right, I did always fiddle around and write music from a very young age, and I always have felt that is a bit of my calling. But at the same time, if you don't have other skills, just being a composer isn't particularly going to, you know, earn your bread and butter. So I did think that I would, when I came to making those life decisions, I did think I've got to have one useful skill, i.e. play an instrument to a high level at least. And the piano was something that was always tinkering in the background, but I never spent a lot of time. I was sort of, sometimes I always, with a lot of young people now, kids who are learning the piano, they are often taught in a kind of you will be a pianist kind of way, whereas that piano for me is a bit of a tool. And I don't mean that rudely, but it is, I'm not going to be playing any concertos anytime soon on the piano. I'm not anything like that sort of pianist. But that doesn't mean you can't use it a lot as a tool to mess around and use just, you know, which is how I think most people do. Certainly composers use the piano. Anyway, so that was going on in the background, and then I focused on the cello. And then when I came back to London in 2000, I had to start working, so I needed to pay the bills. And so I got some teaching work very quickly, and it was group teaching. And so with not a lot of experience, I suddenly had these kids, and they weren't they hadn't chosen to do music. They're put into a room with me in an afternoon, and they looked at me and they thought, this is going to be fun, you know. And they made life really hard for me. They were not cooperating, and they had to play pieces that, you know, sort of arrangements of Handel and a bit of Bach and stuff like that. And these kids never practiced, and it was too difficult. You know, they were struggling with it, and they clearly didn't want. The music was not doing anything for them. They didn't feel that they wanted to do it. It would look too complicated. They didn't really have the reading skills at all, and whilst I could have made them do it, I could have shown them how to do it. And, you know, at the end of it, I was thinking, well, this is not what motivates me as a musician. We don't go to music college to learn music we don't want to play. We go there to learn Brahms concertos or Beethoven sonatas, you know, because that's the music we like. So what music do children like? That was my feeling. Because if we can give them music that they like, for example, if you want them to read a book, you don't give them Ulysses, you know, you give them a children's book, and there are some amazingly good children's books. And for some reason, I felt that there was a bit of a hole in especially the string teaching repertoire, where the music wasn't particularly tailored for young people. So then I just thought, well, I can just tweak this piece. I can see what's useful about it. I can see what techniques they're going to develop here. But they don't like the piece, so I need to change it so that they do like the piece. So that normally came about with either simplifying it ever so slightly, making it a bit shorter, and then most importantly, giving it the backing and accompaniment that makes them feel like they're really making music, that they're playing music that excites them. So I started doing that, and even while I was doing that, it wasn't always easy to persuade my colleagues to let me do this, because they have their ways of doing things. So it took a while before I could start to sort of bleed it in. But then I started working with a brilliant teacher in Haringey, where I was very close to where I live now. And she was devising a program for a whole class instrumental program, where all the children at year age of 8 are learning the violin or the cello. And then I would play the piano in her classes, and she would teach the class, and I'd play the piano. And then I would be jazzing up the piano parts accordingly. And then gradually we just started amassing this repertoire, and then I started adding stuff to it. So I'd write pieces to add to the program. And after, it was about 8 years of this, I then made a CD, because I had my Mac computer at home with GarageBand, which I discovered by accident. And I thought, what is this program called GarageBand? And I was, oh my God! So I instantly set about creating these insane sort of camp over the top backing tracks. And then we delivered that program to our schools in Haringey. And then after that, other music services were also looking for material like this that was specifically tailored for this purpose. And one in particular was asking for it. So I was about to hand over a pile of photocopies and a CD and say, help yourself, you know, buy me a bottle of wine. And I thought actually, there's probably a wider audience market for this, I felt. And also, what I don't want is piles of photocopies. What I want is a nice, cute book, a little book that's cheap with a little CD, and it's presented in a way that's child-friendly. Because whilst I had this, you know, my source material for it really was also a lot of written by Sheila Nelson material, who's recently just died actually, very famous string teacher. And in fact, she was the original Tower, what we call Tower Hamlets project in London, which was the inspiration for the Sistema model, I believe. What's his name? Abreu, is that his name?
Abreu?
Who came to London and he saw it, apparently. I understand that's how it worked. So I've taken a lot of her brilliant teaching ideas and I just sort of pimped them up a little bit. Anyway, so, and I also took her, she had these cute little books like this. And I thought that's a really good thing because kids have small violin cases and they need small books to fit in their small violin cases. And everybody else is producing these great big things that cost £10 and, you know. So I wanted something that had a very different feel. So anyway, so then I looked into it and I spent all my money printing up 6,000 books that were all sat in my bedroom. And I was sticking CDs into the back and posting them out one at a time, you know, right at the beginning. And my brother-in-law did the website and my dad did the illustrations and and a friend of mine's company was printing them for me. So it was a very, very in-house, low-budget operation. But I was right. There was a gap in the market for it, and it took off very quickly. And then 3 years later, I rebranded everything. I had written several more books. I changed the covers, made them look professional, and then got a distributor. So since then, it has, until this year, because of COVID, unfortunately, it's taken a bit of a hit, but until this year, it's been getting better every year. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun, really. And it's a good outlet for my sort of, and it's my creativity, if you like.
This is great. Do you have a book handy? No, that you can.
I thought so. Hang on a sec. Oh, I got some dictations. I've got the old one. This is what it looked like to begin with. This is me. I used the Word program to make the cover.
It's great.
I want to show you the new ones. They look a bit nicer now, but you can see them online anyway. But that was the old vintage original one. That one. Yeah, no, there's a few of them in the cupboard, but I won't.
No, but it's good. It's good so people know what we're talking about. No.
Yeah, I know. Well, the inside of it looks pretty much the same as it always has done. It's what I call need to know information. So it's just really anything you need to know in order to play the violin as soon as possible. So you can start teaching straight away from the beginning, and then gradually introduce note reading. Note reading is quite important when you're teaching in groups because they need to start progressing at their own rate. So if you've got a particularly bright, motivated child in a group of 30, you need to give them the tools so that they can progress faster if they want to.
Yeah.
So in that sense, note reading is important. Otherwise, we do move at the same level, but you want to somehow allow for smarty pants kids to move faster if they want. So we do start reading notes straight away. And at the age of 8, that's not a problem for kids. They can do it quite easily. As long as you keep it simple and the structure of the music is very laid out simply and the rhythm is simple, because it's actually the rhythm that's the hardest thing conceptually for children to get. To understand rhythm is such an abstract thing to look at. they feel it instinctively. You know, they have profound instincts for feeling rhythm, but they don't. To read it is a very academic thing,
Yeah.
And it's a shame to hold them back because they struggle to read something. So a lot of the rhythmic interest comes in the accompaniment, and then what they play is very straightforward bowings, open strings from the first half of the book, and then fingers down. But in order to get everyone, for everyone to feel motivated, they have to feel that it's not very challenging. So the challenges are very gentle. So they always feel like, oh, I'm getting better at this, but it doesn't feel like I'm working very hard. And I think that's immensely motivating for children. So it's getting getting the right balance between too easy and too difficult, because both of those things will demotivate. So they have to stay on this kind of trajectory, and getting that. And so I think in that sense, getting a good book where every piece, you can use every piece, that's what I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be one of those, because there's a lot of books I use where I use one or two pieces, and then, you know, and if children haven't got much money, and if the music services don't have much money to buy stuff, they don't want to be buying one piece from this book and, you know, one piece from that book. Yeah. They want something that's going to cover all of the basics. And then if you can buy, then as I do, I buy supplementary stuff from other books as well.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I have two questions, Thomas. The first one, the school that you work in, is it a private school or a public school? I'm just curious to know if because this teacher said that she wanted everybody to play violin and cello at the age of 8, right? Mm-hmm. Is it common in the country that the students learn an instrument?
It depends on the borough. So we have the country is split into boroughs, constituencies, if you like. And London has quite a lot of constituencies alone. So, and what the education service says that you have to teach music, but how the schools decide to teach music is where there are differences. In Haringey, we have a very good music centre, music service. So it's all public funded, and the schools buy into it. So the schools will say, okay, for our year 4s, our 8-year-olds, we're going to buy this service from the music service. So we bring instruments and we bring teachers, and then the kids are supposed to get an hour group lesson, everyone together, and then you get an hour and a half of a what we call backup lessons, where you get smaller half-hour sessions with one of the two teachers, and then that's for a year, and then they can choose if they want to continue. So part of the package includes also teaching the kids a year later who carry on, and we have quite a high success rate of kids wanting to continue as well. So then after that, then it feeds into ensembles, after school ensembles, and then they also might have to choose to pay for individual lessons. I mean, it's not going to be free forever, unfortunately, but it's a very, and that model of whole class stuff is quite widespread in this country. It's quite affordable, and it's I think it's a very good model in the sense that it reaches everyone. Not everyone's going to be a violinist, but once you've learned to read the notes on a violin, you can transfer that to other instruments, and then it gives you basic rhythm, basic skills that are totally transferable. And I think that in that sense, it's an excellent model, and I think increasingly in other countries it is as well. There are also private schools doing this. I myself only teach in state schools, public schools. Not in part, I suppose it's sort of by choice, but it's also circumstances. Mm-hmm. I like that. I prefer that. I feel like it's a bit more appreciated amongst children who might not otherwise have access to this at all.
Mm-hmm. And you said that this program has gone for a few years. Have have you noticed a change, or how can you this, because this is the interesting part about music programs, no? It's like how you measure things. For you, I'm talking about personally, no? How have you noticed a change of a transformation, or?
It's there are so many variables in how neighborhoods change and schools change. It's really hard to pinpoint what causes or brings about those changes. But I think there's something unique about music that there's one school, for example, in Hackney, which is not the richest part of London, and they have a new school there, and they don't have a vice principal. And I said, why don't you have a vice principal who's supposed to be in charge of behavior and schooling behavior and things like that? And he said, well, we don't, because we have a string program. All the children are learning violin every day, and that somehow instills in them a sense of discipline. And he said it effectively takes care of behavior in school, which is amazing. I mean, I don't know how many scientific studies there have been about it, but I can believe it because the type of focused concentration in a music class, it does carry over into everything else. I mean, how can it not? You know, you don't suddenly switch off your brain when you leave a music class and go into I mean, obviously there's a change, but it's that respect and the discipline and the challenge. It's such a challenging thing to do as well. And I feel, so anyway, I if that's true, which I suspect it is, I've seen it in more than one place where the music program is what takes care of a large part of the discipline in school.
It's very beautiful and very inspiring what you're sharing, no?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend always, of course, on the headship and whether the head teachers are behind it completely, because that makes a big difference. If the head teachers are a bit sort of, can you babysit these kids with their violins for an hour? That's not the right attitude. I mean, they have to be invested in it. And when they are, then it's, yes, I absolutely do notice it. You can tell straight away as you walk into a school. But like I said, I don't know how much there is because of music and vice versa, but they clearly cross feed, I think.
Mm-hmm. I saw so beautiful what you're doing, Thomas.
Well,
yeah,
it's fun. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, I have to say.
Yeah,
it is fun, and I still do it. Now I do it very locally now, so I don't even have to travel much. But I don't do a lot. I do 3 schools I go to now.
Mm-hmm. But I want to share with people that are joining us now in the conversation that Thomas and I went to school together at University of Michigan. Thomas is a cellist, but he's also sharing what he does in a way to I don't know if the word is help, but to promote, to inspire young little kids to learn music, no? And you believe that playing in a ensemble makes a huge difference, especially at the beginning, no, of learning an instrument. So this is it's just great, and I'm saying this because I know Thomas from his cello playing, fabulous cellist that we actually played many times at Michigan together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also as you were talking, I was recalling also that you were already writing music at Michigan when I was there.
I not a lot. I did in some courses, but I didn't do a lot. I did some a little bit afterwards. I wrote some for a cello event for Brave New Works.
I remember.
And
yeah.
I came back for that. That was really fun. Working with Katri and Vivian and Christine Chu. We did a cello quartet that I wrote. That was and I think at the time I was thinking it was something that I knew I was going to be pursuing at some point. So it's still something that keeps going. I mean, I write for grown-ups as well, not just children, but you know, at the moment, writing for children is I feel like it's a more immediate need, and you know, your pieces are going to be played at least.
Thomas, Justin Bruns is watching us, and he says, "Hi, Thomas."
Hey, Justin. Oh yeah, well, Justin, yeah, we reconnected because I have an orchestra. I conduct an orchestra up in North London, and we needed soloists. We need soloists every now and then. And I thought, who do I know? And we were gonna. I hadn't fixed the concerto, but I wrote to Justin and I said, I don't suppose, because I know he's, you know, earning lots of money at Atlanta Symphony. I thought maybe he can cut me a deal. And he came and he played the Tchaikovsky concerto. The orchestra's still talking about it now. They keep going on about how wonderful it was. And then yeah, no, it was great to see him.
And we only have 3 more minutes, but could you tell us about, Thomas, about your conducting experiences in London? Yeah.
Well, it was something that it was something else that I wanted to have a go pursue a little bit. It's not a huge ambition of mine necessarily, but it was something I wanted to explore because actually from a composing point of view, it's just very, very useful to study scores at that level where you have to think about everything. And so I had this wonderful orchestra, and in fact I had two. I gave up one of them a few years ago because it was too tiring. But I had one now. Unfortunately, we haven't played for a while. But we've been doing some really, you know, Mahler symphonies and Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, all these crazy stuff. And we work on it for 10 weeks, which is good for me because it gives me a longer time to, you know, experiment and try things out, which if you're learning to conduct, as you know, it's practicing is the hardest thing you can do because where do you practice? You know, you can't. So it's tremendous fun, yeah. And we normally do 3 concerts a year, maybe a little bit more. No,
and are they local musicians?
Yes, they're all, yeah, because where we rehearse is a sort of a bit inaccessible. It's up on the rather nice neighborhood up in Muswell Hill, and so we do rely on very much local musicians. But there's a huge band of amateur musicians there. Very, very good players, but they're all doctors and accountants and lawyers and all the rest of it. But they all really love music and they love playing, and they all came out of the woodwork, and you know, they take it very seriously. And we rehearsed for only a couple of hours, plus including the tea break, which actually isn't very long, really. But because it's over a 10-week period, we really have time to get to know each other, playing the music, get to know music a lot of detail, like we did when we were students. And so the concerts are always really uplifting and enormous fun, a completely different experience. It's enormous fun.
That's great. I would love to see you conduct, Thomas.
I would love to too. It's been a while now, but hopefully we'll be back in the spring, I think, hopefully.
Actually, I was just remembering that when you were here in Chile, you saw my orchestra with a guest conductor, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was ashamed I couldn't see you working, but
another time. Well, Vivian just showed up. Hi, Thomas, says Vivian. Well, Thomas, it's time to finish. I'm so thankful that you were here with me this morning and with all of the people that are watching us, and to get to know you even more. No, we were such a good friends at Michigan, and like we shared before, we shared a flat together for a year or 2. I don't remember.
It was 1 year, and then that was my last year.
Yeah. So we were very close at school, and we played together many times, and
yes,
and it just
good times.
just wonderful also to know what you're doing besides the cello, no? You keep busy.
Yeah, it all feeds in, it all feeds into the same thing, which is being a musician, I suppose. Yeah. No, it's just fun.
I mean, what we do is just infinite. We can, and what you said before is so important also to keep the creativity going, no? I think that's essential, no?
Yeah, keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Thomas, and
it's a pleasure.
And please, let's stay connected, and thank you again for being part of these conversations, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and I will see you next Sunday. So bye bye, and thank you so much. Bye, Thomas.